Jay Runer here, and today we're going to be talking about downforce, toe caster, and camber, and differentials. Now, I do apologize for the sparsity of my videos here lately. The work schedule for the holidays has ramped up, so I've been unavailable for a while and haven't been able to play, but here we are today. This is going to be the final episode before we do the fine tuning of this car, the Camaro. So, we're going to be talking about your differentials, toe camber, and caster. If you do not have the parts, you need your full race upgrade, race suspension, your race differential, so you can tune the differential, and you'll need full aerodynamics front and back. So once you get those parts together, we're going to go to the tuning screen. I'm going to start with the easier one. It is your differentials. The way it has it set up now, I don't personally like it. I usually go 175 and adjust it later in tuning. Now, what does each one of these do? Acceleration is the higher the percentage on the acceleration is when you're on the throttle. How much oversteer you get on the throttle. If you lessen it, you get understeer. So remember that if you're having trouble in putting throttle outside of a corner, you can always adjust that accordingly. And deacceleration is when you let go of the throttle. So increasing this, lifting throttle will give you understeer, and decreasing it will give you oversteer. So those are the two things you need to remember in adjusting your differential. Acceleration is how much oversteer you get on throttle, and deacceleration is how much understeer or oversteer you get on let going of the throttle. Now, there's many ways you can tune that, but I'm just informing you how they work so you can make that judgment for yourself and the best way to adjust accordingly. It depends on driving style also. Maybe you're one of those kind of guys that likes to lift throttle through corners, which is nothing wrong with that. It's a technique. It works. It generally works for me too. And there's those people that want to hit the corner and then accelerate through it the entire time. So it's all according to you. All right, moving on to aerodynamics. Now, aerodynamics don't really mess with your suspension. I did have a conversation with somebody in my comment section wondering if aerodynamics did. From what I can tell, I've never seen it ever mess with the suspension at all. The only thing that I have noticed is that the more downforce that you put on a car, the decrease of speed, of course, because it causes drag, and the increase of G-forces. Now, the other thing that you get from increasing your downforce to full is understeer. Now, understeer can be either a good thing or a bad thing depending on your suspension setup, but generally, understeer is pretty bad. But there's ways to tune around that. So what I generally like to do is I take both of them minus about, 10, 20 points from each side until the G-forces down there in the left corner go down by maybe 1 point or so, and on both ends, like the front and the rear. Or you can, but that's just generally how I tune my aerodynamics, so I don't lose too much speed, but also have the maximum amount of grip. Now, there are instances where you will use full aerodynamics on handling tracks. Yes, you will need that because speed doesn't matter all that much. It can in some cases, depending on the track. But the more downforce you put on the car, more understeer you will incur, and the less downforce, the more oversteer you will have. So remember that when tuning your aerodynamics, and tune accordingly to the way you drive. And also, I think I said it already, but increasing your downforce does decrease your top end, which in some cases it doesn't matter. But it looks like in this game, from what I've noticed, the grippier the car, the better handling the car is, the better off you are. So I don't know if they adjusted the way speed cars function in this game. It looks like they have, because speed cars used to be able to dominate a lot of times. So moving on to your toe caster camber, and the fun stuff. Where fine tuning a car is essential here. Now, all three of these components are going to be your fine tuning components. These will be the ones that you will adjust to get your oversteer just right, or your understeer just right, or a correction of something. It's just very minute little things that you'll do to each one of them. Now, not saying if you adjust one, you have to adjust the others. No, these are the fine tuning aspects. You can run full aero in the differential setup I got, and you can adjust everything here, or not adjust anything here and adjust everything in downforce or in your differentials. It's however you want to do it. Those are the three things that can really fine tune your car. So what does each one do? Your camber, generally the negative will give you understeer or stability. Other direction will give you oversteer. Now, be careful with that assumption that, oh, I can just slide it all the way to 0 or all the way to 1 and get like awesome turn in. No, there's a point in time where the car will start to cause drag, or it'll be too much and it won't work like you want it to. But there is a plethora of ways to tune your toe, caster, and camber, and you can tune it to where you want the front to control and the rear to just follow the front, or you want the rear to control, which generally people want the rear to push the car around for control instead of the front. But you would generally want oversteer in the rear and understeer in the front, which this setup is generally like that, but it could be tweaked a little bit further. And your toe is a stabilizer. It from what I can tell, and anyone can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it feels like it's a multiplier to these numbers here. This one's at a -1, and that's at a 0.5. It could be at a point at a 1, because I see this as a multiplier. Like, this will multiply the way these function depending on how many clicks you put on there. Now, generally, you don't want to go over 3 because that starts to cause drag, and drag will cause stability issues, because just like in your camber, toe works the same way. Negative is your understeer, positive is your oversteer. Now, there are some cases where you want to use toe if the car is just not acting correctly or the way you want it to. You might want to amplify it with maybe a point here or there, but that's totally up to you. This is like generally my last thing that I use for trying to tune the car, like if I want a certain kind of handling car. But just remember, try not to go over 3 degrees or 0.3 on either side, because it can cause major drag really quickly. Now, your caster, this can change entirely how you tune your camber and toe completely. It all depends on where you want it. If you max it out to 7 degrees in a straight line, your tires will be at a 0. That means they'll be the flattest they'll possibly be when going in a straight line, which is great for acceleration. But then again, if you don't have your camber or your toe adjusted accordingly to your caster, your car will not react. It won't react correctly, and you'll get some funky things happen when you do that. You can get some major understeer or some major oversteer, but generally people like 5.5, 5. They usually don't mess with the caster, but for the sake of this video, a lot of people don't know what this does and how to use it. The more you push it here to 1 degree is better for cornering. So the lower you go, the better your cornering will generally be, but your straight line grip will be like totally destroyed. It'll feel like you're skating on ice a lot of times when you're in a straightaway. But like I said, the caster will affect how you tune your camber and toe completely. I mean, to the point where I've tested that if a caster is at 7 degrees, the camber can literally be at 0 and it will function correctly. Now, that is just an extreme example of what I've seen and what I've tested. And on the other end, at 1 degree, you'll have some outrageous negative camber. You'll be up in like the 3s or the 4s, but it still functions. So I don't know if that's the physics of the game, because in reality, I don't think that would work as well. But this game isn't generally based on reality. It's semi sim, but it's not truly sim. So let your imagination play with that. See what you can do with it, because you can have a lot of success with a full-fledged caster, or a not so full-fledged caster, or maybe a midway caster. Maybe you want to try a 3.5, but know that this will affect the way you tune your camber and your toe. So that concludes today's episode of Advanced Tuning. The next episode will be, I will be fine-tuning this car and showing all the little nuances and techniques that I use when actually tuning a car. So everything right now is tuned accordingly the way I want it to, until we take it on a track. And that's the thing about tuning. Testing your tune. You're gonna have to do laps, lots of laps, to get it the way you want it. But that's the point of being a tuner. It's like, you like to fiddle with stuff. You like to test new ideas, concepts, and general ideas. So the next episode will be the final episode of Advanced Tuning. We're going to be doing the tuning of the car. We're going to balance it out, make it a functional car for the A-Class, so when they bring it back, I'll have an A-Class car to run. And these techniques work for any class. So this has been Jay Reuter. Like, subscribe.